and we'll get going.
What would you say now, Gary?
That's right. That's right. Now
Yeah,
we're
really.
on the
Oh,
permanent record.
how did your class go Sunday with the rearrangement you did?
Actually, we only went over like 10, 12 minutes doing both sermons and the week's lesson. So I was pleasantly pleased.
Yeah, good deal.
So we're on your schedule now. So your classmates can talk to ours. Well, not really. You do it on Sunday. No, don't let them because we don't do it Sunday night.
Oh, goodness. That's fun. All righty. All right. Well, here we go. We are into chapter 17, and Acts is beginning to read more and more like a novel than anything else at this point. It's just action packed. So, and it will be from here on out. So. All right, so beginning on Monday, the 8th reading, that's the beginning of chapter 17. So again, at the end of 16, they're still in Philippi. And so then they go and they are making their way to Thessalonica. And so Paul and Silas are passing through. And so here I found a map that I want to show you. So that way you can get a better sense of which direction they're going. So, all right. So here's Philippi. Y'all can see my cursor, right?
Yes.
Okay. So here's Philippi. So this is the edge of Macedonia. Macedonia kind of goes like this. And so it's indicated down here. So then they go to Amphipolis and Apollonia, and then they go over here to Thessalonica. So they're sort of following the coast here, and then they cut across. So this is Thessalonica. This is the place where the two letters to the Thessalonians, that's the church there, is where those letters are addressed to. And depending on how you date those, scholars date them differently, but the possibility exists that what we call First Thessalonians, may have been written not very long after Paul and Silas leave at the end of verse 9. So it might not have been very long after that he wrote that letter and sent it to them. And then just as a heads up for the next section, here's Berea. So they leave Thessalonica in a hurry and they head to Berea. So that you can see where those are. All right. Stop sharing and pop back over here. There we go. All right. So they make their way to Thessalonica, and there is a synagogue here. So this is a place where there's enough of a Jewish population that they've set up a synagogue. And so on 3 consecutive Sabbaths, Paul goes in and argues with the Jews there, as was his custom. He argues from the scriptures, explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Messiah to suffer and rise from the dead. And then he goes on to say, this is the Messiah, Jesus, whom I am proclaiming to you. Some of them were persuaded. So some of them, meaning some of the Jews, and then also a great many of the devout Greeks, and not a few of the leading women. I think it's interesting. Yes, go ahead. Oh. No, you're still muted.
Go ahead and finish your statement, because you may be going to say what I was going to say.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say that I think it's interesting that that Luke includes the fact that leading women are part of the group of people that are converted in this moment, as opposed to the leading women who, mounted an insurrection against him in a few chapters ago.
Yeah, I was curious why he did include them. So much of the Bible doesn't talk about the women, but
right,
rather the men, and
right.
That was interesting.
Yes. Let me see here. Trying to think. where it was.
But N.T. Wright, I don't believe thought anything about it. So,
right. I mean, I think it's one of the particularities of Luke and his writing is that he does include references to women. So, if you read through the gospel, you see there's an emphasis placed on women that are part of Jesus's ministry, and in a patriarchal culture that would have been out of the norm for an author to take that and make that a big point. So it's just a pattern that Luke has over the course of his writing. So, all right. So, but then again, the Jews become jealous, and with the help of some ruffians, they form a mob and they set the city in an uproar, and they search for them. And in the midst of that, a guy named Jason gets drug into the mix. The only other reference to a Jason in the New Testament is in Romans 16:21, and he is referred to as a compatriot of Paul. There in the greeting section in Romans 16. But so it may be this guy, maybe another Jason. But anyway, he gets caught up in this, and they drag him. This mob that forms. They go and they attack his house, and then when they can't find Paul and Silas, they drag Jason to the magistrates, and they begin to shout, "These people are turning the world upside down, and they have come here also." And Jason has entertained them as guests. He's been in there. They've been in his home at some level, and they are acting contrary to the emperor, and they have named another king Jesus, and that's one of the biggest tensions at this point in time between the Roman Empire and Christianity, is that Christianity is naming King Jesus rather than King Caesar, which is a big bone of contention for the Romans and their leaders. And they're disturbed, and anyway, but Jason gets out of jail, and he's let go. So anyway, that's but they get Paul and Silas basically run from Thessalonica in this moment because because a stir gets put up. So it says in verse 10, which is the next day, that very night the believers sent Paul and Silas off to Berea, and when they arrived, guess where they go? The synagogue. They're just consistent on this thing. It's fun. If there's a synagogue, they're going to go there. So they go to Berea, and these Jews, verse 11 says, were more receptive than those in Thessalonica, for they welcomed the message very eagerly and examined the scriptures every day to see whether these things were so. So you hear, like, the way that I remember that the Bereans were welcoming of the message is that there was the church. The first church I served under appointment in the North Texas Conference had a Sunday school class called the Bereans, and they were, when I went to see them and meet with them and sit in on their class, they were very quick to tell me that they were not the Thessalonians, because the Thessalonians didn't adhere to, didn't accept the message, but the Bereans did, and that's how I always remember that the Bereans are the one who were willing to sit and accept them and examine the scriptures. So anyway, that's just a fun fact about me. Anyway, but many of them believed, again, including not a few Greek women and men of high standing. So again, here's this line about not just the Greeks, not just some Greeks, but of men and women of high standing. So some of the again, the reference to the women is particular for Luke because he pays attention to that kind of thing. But the reason, it's sort of, if we go back to the last chapter in Lydia, she was a woman of means. She would have been able to, obviously she had her own home. Whether or not she has a husband, we don't know. But she was able to provide hospitality. She was able to provide a place for Paul and Silas to for some rest and respite, for whatever. And then she was more than likely able to provide resources for the journey. Obviously, traveling from place to place was expensive over time. And we're going to get to, in chapter 18, we'll see that Paul still had a trade. He was a tent maker. And so when he meets up with Priscilla and Aquila, they gather together around the fact that they both, that all three of them were tent makers. And he used that money that he did to fund some of it, but he also had benefactors, probably like Lydia and maybe some of these men and women of high standing. They may have supported him as well. So. But then the Jews in Thessalonica get word that they've gone to Berea, and so they go and they try to stir up and incite the crowds there. And so the believers then grab them up, send them to the coast. And Silas and Timothy, remember they're still part of this, they remain behind. And they send him as far as Athens, which is where we'll find him in just a little bit. And then he sends instructions to Silas and Timothy to join him as soon as possible. So there's this blow up in Thessalonica, and then they go to Berea, and they have more success there. But then the Thessalonians come down, and they're like, this, and so they have to leave Berea as well. But he leaves. He takes everybody with him when he goes to Berea, but he leaves Silas and Timothy when he goes to Athens. All right. So let's see. All right. So I'll stop there and see what questions you have about those two stops along the way, or any of the 4 questions from those 2 days. Before we jump to Athens, because there's a lot that happens in Athens.
I enjoyed that one in Athens. Yeah. First question on Monday. Mm-hmm. Why do you think Paul's efforts to argue with the Jews backfires on him? Mm-hmm. Wright on page 75 talks about, on the one hand, we have threats and opposition from Jews. On the other, as in Philippi, we have pagans who whip up charges about laws, customs, and religion. So is that kind of what we're thinking about here? Is all the other elements that are coming in to mess with his mind, or is it something specific you had in mind with that question?
Well, I think it's a.
I'm listening. I'm just writing. No,
that's fine. I think there's the recipe that he uses of going to the Jew first and then to the Gentiles is one that he's comfortable with, because obviously, like I've said before, going into the synagogue, he's going to an audience that is familiar with the Jewish scriptures, so he can speak from that particular perspective. All the while knowing that there are people from outside the Jewish tradition who are probably mingling around and listening to that. But he's poking at the Jewish understanding of who the Messiah is. And in just the same way that he was agitated that when right before Stephen was stoned, he's stirring up the people and going house to house. Now he's the one who's stirring up people. So I think his efforts to argue with them are because they backfire on him, because he's poking at the bear. I mean, he's poking at their very understanding of how God works in the world. And if he's also looking at the Gentiles and the Greeks that are on the periphery of this synagogue, I don't know exactly what it looks like in that synagogue setup, but if there's like, those who are sort of still figuring this whole thing out and they're like interested in this, this Jewish God or whatever, but they haven't fully committed or they haven't fully gone through the process, they are sort of on the periphery. If he's looking at them and saying, and by the way, you don't have to get circumcised, then, their radar is like off the charts at that point, because that's the same thing, that's the reason they had that whole discussion in Acts 15. It's like, you went to the Gentiles and said they don't have to, they don't have to get circumcised, they don't have to follow the law, they don't have to eat kosher, what's up with that? And they had this whole conversation. And so now he's going again, because this is the first time he's been into a synagogue since chapter 13, I think. Anyway, it's the first time he's been there in a while, because it's the first time he's gone to a place that's had one. And so he's back to his old habits, but he's still poking at him. He's still saying, you know what? Here's your Messiah. Here's the Jewish Messiah. This is the Messiah, Jesus, whom I'm proclaiming to you. And that's just the short form of it. I mean, obviously Luke doesn't, we don't get the whole transcript of what he said to them, but more than likely it's similar to what he said before. And so they are like, wait a minute, that undoes all the things, and then it lets in all these outsiders into the family, and they don't even have to jump through the hoops. So sure, they're going to be upset. It's his pattern, so he's going to keep doing it. Obviously, he's going to do it again in Berea, but but it blows up on him, and maybe it catches more people's attention because it does. I don't know. You're muted.
Last week I brought up the fact that something I'd read said there weren't enough adult male Jews to create a synagogue. Well, this week in reading 17 and reading my life application notes, it says 10 was the minimum requirement.
Oh, wow.
Just whether that's true or not, it's in the Bible. It just happened to be in the notes.
It's in the study notes, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not technically in the Bible. Anyway,
Yeah.
That's okay. Those study notes are somebody's interpretation.
Yeah.
And commentary.
Just
like this is a commentary as well.
Anyway. Yeah. Oh yes. That reminds me. Somebody, and it was a lady in our class, brought up the fact: how did they ever determine whether somebody was a Jew or not? How did they know if they were circumcised or not? Did they have a little tattoo on their hand or something, or did they just?
I'm getting a visual. I don't.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. It's like you got to go into the back room and
yes, yeah.
Out, Like, okay.
Well, we're talking about Timothy. How did they know before and after? Right. Just it was just an observation.
No,
she's good at bringing up those things.
I have one of those too.
Yeah. All right. Very good. All right. What else about Thessalonica or Berea? Anything else?
The notes in the Bible have a really good answer, I thought, for your first question. What qualities did the Berean Jews have that the Thessalonians didn't? Open hearts and clear minds.
There you go. Exactly.
I thought that was just.
That's it.
Said and done.
That says it all.
Yeah, I mean, verse 11 says that they were more receptive. They welcomed the message very eagerly and examined the scriptures every day. I mean, what more could you ask for?
Exactly.
Is to be, receptive and welcoming, and then not only that, but then to dig in as well. So, and that's why that Sunday school class was so very proud of being the Bereans.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're off to Athens. So I'll put the I'm gonna put the map back up for you real quick because I want to point out a couple things. All right, so slide over here. All right, so here's Thessalonica and Berea, and then all the way down here is Athens. So he goes a long way to get there. We're not told that he stops anywhere else, maybe he does, but he goes all the way down into Achaia, which is the southern province of Greece. This is like, so Macedonia is up here, it's the northern section of Greece, and then Achaia is this this southern section of Greece. So obviously Athens is down here. And so he has gone almost as far south as he can go on this particular peninsula, and so he is, I mean, if you think about Greek mythology and things that we know from history. I mean, we got Thebes, we got Delphi. I mean, these are prominent places in Greek culture. And so, and more than likely, each of these places would have had some kind of one of their particular Greek gods or goddesses as their sort of their hometown hero, so to speak. So like even, I mean, Ephesus even is mentioned as the home of Artemis. Anyway, which is one of the Greek gods. We'll get to Ephesus on the third missionary journey. But anyway, so he's gone a long way, and so he gets there and he's deeply distressed that the city is full of idols. And so he goes to the synagogue, and he argues with them, and the devout person. So that would be the Jews or the Greeks who are considering the claims of Judaism, and then also in the marketplace every day with those who happen to be there. So then there's some Epicurean and Stoic philosophers that debated with him, and they're wondering what he's talking about, because they say he seems to be a proclaimer of foreign divinities. And then in parentheses, it says this was because he was telling the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. So Luke's helping us out there a little bit about what he was talking about. And so they take him and bring him to the Areopagus and asked him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? It sounds rather strange to us, so we would like to know what it means." So what they're doing is they are, these philosophers are good at having conversations and debates, and just whatever sort of comes up, they're good at just talking it out and figuring it out, and batting things around, and it's just sort of the nature of what they do. And so Paul comes into this scene and he's talking about Jesus, and he's talking about resurrection, and he's talking about how this is the Jewish Messiah, and they're like, this is interesting. It's not in line, or it's not the same as our pantheon. It's not exactly the same as all these other divinities. He's not talking about Zeus and Hermes and things like that. He's talking about this Jesus guy. And so they're like, this is strange. Come and tell us more. So because in verse 21, the Athenians and the foreigners living there would spend their time in nothing but telling or hearing something new. So they loved to do this. It was part of their culture. It was part of how they operated from day to day. And so Paul, being somebody who liked to talk, just jumped right in. And he was specific about talking about Jesus. So anyway, but the undercurrent for Paul is that he's distressed about all of these idols. But his argument with the Jews And then his willingness to have conversation in the marketplace catches the attention of the philosophers. They're like, what's this guy talking about? So his habit of going to the synagogue and then having conversation with anybody else that'll listen catches their attention, and they're like, hey, come tell us more. But they're receptive to it because it's what they do. It's part of their culture. It's how they, just make the way in the world. So, all right. So they take him to the Areopagus. Now, Areopagus is a transliteration, which means it's the letters in the original language just turned into, just dropped into English. And what it really means is it's Mars's hill. So Mars, or Ares, the Greek god of war, it's his hill. That's what that means. Areopagus means It means Ares's hill. So that gives you an idea of sort of the geography of this, that it's some kind of raised place where people would come and apparently begin to have conversations about things and debates about things. And so then when we turn to verse 22, which starts the text that I'll preach on Sunday, he stands in front of Mars's hill, or Ares's hill, and he says, I see how extremely religious you are in every way. He goes through, he says, I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects of your worship, and I found among them an altar with the inscription, to an unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. So he goes on to talk about the God who made heaven and earth, and he does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself has given life to mortals, and their life and breath and all things. Goes on to say that he's made all the nations to inhabit the whole earth, allotted times for their existence, boundaries of places where they should live, and that they would search for God and perhaps grope for him and find him, though indeed he is not far from each one of us. And I'll stop there at the end of verse 27. So he is looking around. He has looked around in all of Athens, and he has seen that everywhere he looks, there is evidence of religiousness, that they have, that their culture exudes this idea of trying to look for the divine somewhere. And so they have statues, they have idols, they have monuments, inscriptions all over the place. He says, I see how extremely religious you are. And so when I looked that up, it's from two Greek words that mean, the first part is to dread or to fear, and the other one is a deity. So it means that basically they are, that they're fearful of gods, or superstitious is another way of translating that. And so that it's the only time that occurs in the New Testament, just in case you were wondering. So this idea of being extremely religious, that it almost feels like he's pointing out to them that they are, that their efforts are sort of to try to cover all of their bases, like, and so then he goes, and you even have this one inscription to an unknown God. It's like, we've got all these other, like there's sun and the moon and the stars and the earth and the, rain and water and all this kind of stuff. And then there's this one more catch-all, like this unknown God. In case we missed one, here's one more. And so he points at that one and he says, let me tell you about the one that you missed. And so he goes on to talk about the Lord, who made the world and everything in it, the Lord of heaven and earth, who does not live in shrines does not live in temples made by human hands, as if he needed anything. He doesn't, he's not waiting for, offerings and sacrifices to be made so he can eat. He's not, waiting for drink offerings so he can drink. He he's not, but he himself gives life to all mortals, their breath in all things. He's the ancestor who made all the nations to inhabit the earth. And then verse 27, so that, I love it when scripture says so that, because you can get the point right there. So that they would search for God and perhaps grope for him and find him, though indeed he is not far from each one of us. That one verse right there, I could camp on that verse for a while, because each of those verbs, to search, to grope, and to find, they all have this idea of looking with intensity. So to search, to desire, so the first one is to search for, to desire, to seek by inquiring, to investigate, to reach resolution. The sort of the colloquialism is getting to the bottom of the matter, kind of like trying to nail it down. It has concepts of meditating and reasoning, and then the word grope. It's from a word that means to sort of put your hands out like you can't see anything and just sort of feel around until you find what it is that you're looking for. It's like looking for a light switch in the dark with your eyes closed. You know that the wall is nearby, and so you feel the wall, and then you start feeling around because you know the light switch is there somewhere. That's that idea right there. And then to find is to learn and to discover. It's from we get this idea of there's a concept called heuristics, which is it's the study of how we learn and how we understand things. So there's the seeking, there's this feeling around for, and then there's this knowledge part of it, to find God, so that we'll find, so that we'll look for, we'll think about, meditate on, feel around for God, for the God who has created everything. Even though, he says, he is not far from us. He is not at a distance. He is indeed close at hand. So, all right. So there's a lot there. It's like, oh, like I could spend my entire sermon on just that verse right there.
Right there.
I will do my best to cover that and not just like totally camp out there. Although my sermon is not done yet, so we'll see. So then in verse 28, he quotes from, he says, for in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we too are his offspring. And so those are quoted from Greek philosophers and Greek writings. The one about in him we live and move and have our being finds its way into Colossians, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Well, let's see. Looking. It's not in here. Oh, here we go. Yes, Colossians 1:17. Hebrews 1:3. Let me see what Hebrews 1:3 says. I didn't look that one up. Hebrews 1:3 says, he is the reflection of God's glory and the exact imprint of God's very being, and sustains all things by his powerful word. But Colossians. Eat pork chops. All right. All right. 1:17. He himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together, is Colossians 1:17. So, so again, he can't be quoting from scripture because that hasn't been written yet. So keep that in mind. But it does get referred to later in Paul's letter to the Colossians. Okay. Let's see. It's verse 28. And then verse 29, since we are God's offspring, we ought not to think that the deity is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of mortals. He's making this case that the God whom we need to worship, the God, this unknown God that they have a monument to or an inscription to, is the one who created everything, therefore is not like gold or silver or stone, something material, nor even an icon or an image or some kind of creation or even of the imagination. It's not something that we've made up. It's something that's existed already. So while God has overlooked the times of human ignorance, he now commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will have the world judged in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed, and of this he has given assurance by raising him from the dead. So he's tying it right back to Jesus. He's the one who is who will judge the world, which is what started all of this conversation. Was you're talking about this resurrection thing. What does that mean? And so he's bringing it right back. So Paul uses the religious nature and inquisitive nature of the Athenians to gather them into this particular moment, to explain to them what they have missed. Very good. And then the chapter closes out with them scoffing, with some of them scoffing, and others saying, "Hey, let's talk about this some more." And it says, verse 33 says, at that point, Paul left them, but some of them went with him. This sounds familiar from previous experiences. And it says some of them joined him, became believers, including Dionysius the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others. So anyway, the idea of a resurrection from the dead was a new concept, I suppose, for the Greeks, who they understood that they were mortals, and then there were gods, and the gods were immortal, but they weren't gods, so that they didn't live on after they died. They just stopped living. But so some of them brushed it off, some of them mocked them. The idea behind scoffing is like they're making a joke of him. So let's see, hold on. Looked it up. They began to mock him, to jest and mock and jeer, to scoff, ridicule him. So this word occurs twice in the book of Acts, actually twice in the New Testament, and they're both in the book of Acts. You want to know when the other time is? It's right after Pentecost. The Pentecost in Acts 2:13, and those who hear the disciples speaking in the different tongues, they scoffed at them. The people in town, they scoffed at them. It's the same word. So it's this moment of that the Spirit is moving, and this new thing happens, and they're like, "Hey, guess what? You sound and look drunk because you're speaking in these languages that you don't know, so they don't know what's going on." And so the same thing happens here in Acts 17 in Athens. that they scoff at them, that they start to mock them. It's the same thing that's happening. So there you go. But that's only some of them. Others decide, hey, we're going to hear more about this. And they join them, become believers, including Dionysius and Damaris. And so I haven't had a chance to look up if we hear from Dionysius or Damaris yet anywhere else. I think Dionysius sounds familiar from another letter, another place in the New Testament. But the only other time I've heard Damaris is there's a lady that has her own cooking show on Food Network, and her name is Damaris.
I'm sure they're related.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure her mom was like, you know what? Let's name her after this obscure character from the New Testament. Anyway.
Oh.
Anyway. So there you go. So that's Acts 17. There you go. What questions do you have about Athens and Paul's time there?
I don't have anything.
Well, on Friday, what is your response to that first question? Why is the resurrection of the dead such a difficult concept for those outside the faith? Now, I've got an answer for the Greeks, but I'm just, if you're talking about anybody and everybody outside the faith, what is it?
Well, I think that I think one of the hardest things for people to grasp as far as the resurrection goes is that it's possible, like, you know, that someone could come back to life after having been fully dead, and because I think we're quick to, as humans, I think we're quick to just say, like, well, you know, particularly speaking about Jesus, well, and maybe he wasn't dead all the way, and, you know, they prematurely took him off the cross and prematurely put him in the tomb, and then, you know, they just, you know, rolled the stone away, or somehow rolled the stone away, and he just kind of walked out because he just woke up, you know. There's lots of problems with that theory, but people will believe it. But I think it's a lot of it has to do with our own feelings of, for people outside the faith, of, you know, of truly believing that there's something beyond this life that is waiting for us, that is available to us, that you know, many people believe that this is all, you know, the material world is all that there is, and once our time here is done, then, you know, we're worm food essentially, and that's the, you know, that's the ultimate end of us. And you know, people of faith feel like, you know, understand that there's more to life than that, and obviously that hope of the resurrection gives us purpose and gives us impetus to do, you know, do more and be more, and to follow after Christ in the here and now, and not just wait for, you know, the other side. So it also gives us hope for our ability to be reconnected with folks that have gone before us, and not in a, you know, like, y'all remember the comic Family Circus? Remember once in a while, you know, Jeffy would be like, you know, out doing something mischievous, and then there'd be the cloud, and his grandma would be up there looking at him and kind of wagging her finger at him, or, you know, or whatever, you know, something like that, where they're just like watching you, and they're like, you know, but we're just waiting for our turn to, point our finger at our grandkids going, what's wrong with you, kid? Anyway, but I mean, truly, it is a step of faith to believe in the resurrection. It really is. I mean, it's it's the obviously it's the one of the most important things we have to hold on to, even if we don't fully understand it. If we dismiss it out of hand, then we miss out. If people dismiss it out of hand and say, no, that's not even possible, then this life is all there is. And that seems to me, again, as a person of faith, that seems to me to be a very limited understanding of the scope of this world. So anyway, yeah, I think it's difficult for people outside the faith because you have to trust in something bigger than yourself. And a lot of people want to be self-reliant. We're like, I can handle this. I can make my way in this world, and I'll pull myself up by my bootstraps or whatever. It's just I think it's a human nature thing, that we want to just make our own way. Just go back and read Genesis 3. They wanted to make their own way. They wanted to be like God, so they ate from the tree. And everything has been we've had we've had a problem with that ever since. I just sort of repeat that pattern over and over again. So there you go. That's a long answer. I'm sorry. I didn't.
No, that's why, because I only had a short answer. The Greeks had no concept of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them preferred worshiping many gods instead of just one. And the concept of resurrection was unbelievable and offensive to them. So that's all I had. And that's why I say it was so skewed toward the Greek point of view. That
Sure. Yep. Very good. All right. What else?
Since Saturday is part of this week, and it's actually in 18, are we going to talk about that next week?
Yes, we'll talk about
okay.
that.
That's fine.
Yeah, because it's them going to Corinth, and so that'll be the subject of next week's sermon. Their time in Corinth.
I thought I would. I know both of you have read it, but on page 76 of the Wright book, page 76, the last paragraph, and going up to the top of 77. I find that to be some of the most powerful explanations and descriptions of faith and the ways that the Bible uses situations to keep building and building and building all the way through the book, not just a book, but the book.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually highlighted that part in this because I think that's just special.
Mm-hmm.
Got too many of those special.
Well, yeah, that's true. That is very true. He's got a bunch of good stuff in here.
Yeah, I've even got Rosie now. She'll going, okay, Sandy, what does NT say? if I don't reference something in the answer they've discussed, and I go, well, now that you ask.
Right. Yeah, I was the book club met here yesterday around lunchtime, and I was walking through before they were getting started, and Debbie Crow was talking about the book that they were reading, and she said that the author quoted N.T. Wright quite a few times, and she said, every time I hear that, I smile and think about you. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yep.
She's like, I'm just waiting for him to use this quote somewhere. I'm like, okay, we'll see.
Yep.
Because he's written like 80 books, so, and I haven't read them all, so.
Yeah.
You best get busy.
I know,
Yeah.
right?
You
Yeah.
do
I'm gonna take a year off and just read N.T. Wright.
Just read the books.
Yeah, that'll be my goal for this year, is to read all of N.T. Wright's books.
Oh my.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yep.
I'll get through 2 of them, and then.
Yeah.
So very good. All righty. Well, if y'all don't have any more questions, then I will. I'll let y'all go. Appreciate what you do, and if there's anything that pops up, just give me a shout. Remind your folks that Ash Wednesday is the 17th at 7 o'clock. We're going to do in person and online. We're going to send out an email, and there'll be social media stuff, and I'll make announcements in church. Just have people be on the lookout for that. Lent is just around the corner. So it seems like we just finished Christmas. Here we go.
Didn't we?
Yeah, it's kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good.
All
Well,
righty.
thank you so much.